you would, mark in your songbooks numbers 454. 454. Tomorrow will be too late. 454. Now, if you will, turn to 559. 559. If you'd like to stand, you may do so. Let's sing verses 1, 2, and 4. Verses 1, 2, and 4. There is a habitation. There is a habitation built by the living God for all of every nation who sing that grand abode. Oh, Zion, I long thy gates to see. Oh, love.
I believe one of my kids stole my clicker. Yes, Jackson, you're right. It was most likely Pollyanna. Well, I'll just have to do it the old-fashioned way. This is the current condition of our tree. Though the outside trees have lost their leaves and are going into hibernation, our tree continues to grow. And the last time that I took a picture, there were fewer leaves, especially in the book of Acts, but it looks like there's a few more. But we got just a few more weeks, a few more days to try to read as much of the Bible within a year's time and truly make this tree blossom. Even if you have to paste leaves on top of leaves, that just shows the dedication and the amount of growing that we do as God's people. And don't worry, next week's sermon will detail the nitty and gritty of what transpired last night. So everyone's off the hook, in a sense, this week. This morning, I want us to look at a term that many of you may not be aware of, but you see it, and you'll see it more online. The term is rage bait. It is the Oxford Word of 2025. Rage bait is consuming the lives of many people. People who spend hours upon hours in front of a computer will often engage in fights, battling. Within their mind, they're battling for the greater good. They are online heroes within their own minds. And they will search out this rage bait, and they will even continue and pass it along, and they will themselves create rage bait. There's such a thing called clickbait, something that entices you to go and click on it, and it is done so that the person who is posting it can kind of beat the algorithm. But we're going to see how you don't need a computer necessarily to be guilty of rage bait. A quote nowadays is, "If it enrages, it engages." And we're going to see how hateful and how destructive this rage bait can be. You know, we've never been this connected as a civilization, but at the same time, we've never been this separated, this divided. Think back to those during the Reagan era, the Nixon, even before that, and the division that was in the country. We are unfortunately, as Americans, growing more and more divided. And you can see it in the violence, the assassination attempts, the racism, the things that are happening within our streets. You know, social media has its blessings. There are at least one person, when I looked, that is currently joining us online right now. But social media needs to be kept in its place, and we need to make sure that we educate both young and old about the dangers of social media. Because a young girl from our community lost her life due to the influence and the effects of the negative side of social media within our own community. But even before the internet and social media was a thing, rage bait existed. It was a tactic, and it remains a tactic that the devil uses to harm, to ruin, to corrupt people, to blind them to what truly matters. When we think about the value and the importance and the power of our speech, I can't help but go to James chapter 3. In verses 3 through 8, it describes the tongue. Though it is a small member, it can kindle a great fire, and it can sway great ships just like a small little rudder. But James will continue to say, can a spring put forth both fresh water and bitter water? That's not how it should be. And so we as God's people need to be mindful of our tongues, whether it is vocal, written, or you find yourself being a social media warrior, slamming those keys as fast and as hard as you can just to stick it to someone. So what is it? What is rage bait? Well, according to Merriam-Webster, it says rage bait is online content that is intentionally provocative or offensive to elicit an angry or outraged reaction from the viewers, typically to increase clicks, traffic, or engagement. It's also used as a verb to mean making intentionally inflammatory statements. People who will take things out of context of what someone says or does, and they will post something online just to stir up people, just to stir the pot. And so how does it spread so fast? Well, rage baiting deliberately chooses escalation. Rage baiting does not desire to put forth evidence, put forth truth. That's not its desire. Even though what they are saying might be truth, there's a way that we can present truth that is not guilty of rage baiting. Speak the truth with what? Love. But consider what the proverb writer says here. Proverbs 29:22-23 says, "An angry man stirs up strife, and a furious man abounds in transgressions. A man's pride will bring him low, but the humble in spirit will retain honor." You know, this angry man, he wants to just stir something up. This is really sad. A 2025 analysis of over 35 million public posts on Facebook, ranging from the years of 2017 to 2020, they found this: 75% of the new links shared were posted without the user ever even reading the document. The headlines was what made them share it. A 2024 study by researchers at the Northwestern University and Princeton University found that social media posts containing misinformation tend to evoke more moral outrage, anger, and disgust than trustworthy content. And what is so sad is people will search out this kind of information more. There's another term that you may be familiar with or not called doom scrolling. And this is desensitizing a lot of our younger people doom scrolling, because with social media, we are getting film, unedited, unblurred video from the war in Ukraine and Russia, film from the war between Israel and Gaza, and we are able now to see in high definition the murder of innocent children, women, and not live combat, but recorded combat. These drones that are dropping bombs. And what's happening is people are searching this stuff out over and over and over again. Rage bait and outrage evoking posts, whether they are true or false, are facilitated and are worded and created in such a way to oftentimes spread misinformation. A 2024 study by researchers at Cambridge Judge Business School analyzed 579 million posts on Twitter and Facebook. they found that 98% of things shared on Facebook or Twitter were negative. If you use social media to watch cute little cat videos and stay in contact with your family, that's great. Don't go searching for this stuff. Don't give the algorithm, don't give the people that post this garbage any fuel. 98% more posts about negative articles than positive. But when we get down to it, rage bait is a form of mental warfare that so many Christians are engaged in. And they are creating a hostile environment towards someone else, but even within their own mind. And we're blinding people from the simplicity of the gospel, even blinding ourselves. 2 Corinthians 11 and verse 3. It gives the person who engages in this a false sense of, I'm exposing the evils of the world. I'm an online warrior. It's giving them a false sense of purpose, of dedication. And all they are really doing is just stirring the pot. So how does it affect us? You know, Proverbs 26 and verse 20 says, where there is no wood, the fire goes out. And where there is no talebearer, strife ceases. As charcoal is to burning coals and wood to fire, so is a contentious man to kindle strife. This is the type of individual that looks for this. He seeks it out. This is where he gets his purpose, his jollies from. He wants to do it. The words of a talebearer are like tasty trifles, and they go down to the innermost body. And what's sad is oftentimes we are eager to hear this negative information, this doom scrolling. And you know, we even see this throughout history. People don't want to know about peace deals and firefighters saving kittens from trees. We want to know about the crime, what buildings burnt down, how many car accidents. Because our society, and both here in America but elsewhere, we are addicted to this negativeness, the excitement of living in an unstable world. But what happens is it manipulates our emotions. It causes us to ignore blatant truth. You know, the Jews needed to turn Rome against Paul. In Acts chapter 13, verses 44 through 45, I apologize for the extra 5. It says, on the next Sabbath, almost the whole city came together to hear the word of God. So here are people coming to hear the word of God. But when the Jews saw the multitude, they were filled with envy and contradicting and blaspheming. They opposed the things spoken by Paul. So they're getting agitated. They're beginning to build within their minds something. They're not using concise information or reason, but it is an emotional response, and it is an emotional response that cannot be controlled. Envy. And the context reveals that this was not just a one-time occurrence, but it continued to plague them and Paul. But here's what they're going to do to the crowd. Just a few verses down, verses 49 through 50, this is what it says. And the word of the Lord was being spread throughout all the region. But the Jews stirred up the devout and prominent women and the chief men of the city, raised up persecution against Paul and Barnabas, and expelled them from their region. You know, we can look at this word here in Acts chapter 13, verse 50, to stir up, and it's to provoke, to usher, to arouse to violence. And what is so sad is the person posting, the person sharing, the person wanting to agitate people to violence, to take on a unloving, uncharismatic mindset, are just like these Jews. Because look at how it transpires. It begins within their mind, envy, contentions, dislike. They stir up the people. We go just a few more verses down. The next chapter, Acts 14 and verse 2. But the unbelieving Jews stirred up the Gentiles and poisoned their minds against the brethren. What is so interesting about this word, stirred, is it has connotations of arousal. It has getting to the fleshly desires, enticing, not just provoking. That's what they did in 13. They were provoking others, kind of pushing it and getting them to go. Now they are enticing them, alluring them to this violence. But I like what the King James Version says here. Made their minds evil affected. We could have an entire sermon on what happens when your mind is made evil affected. The Gentiles' perception of the truth was twisted, was perverted, was poisoned by these false allegations. They fed emotions that were already there, but they helped push them over to the breaking point, to the point of violence. They did this with Christ, bringing in false witnesses to stir people up to direct a false narrative in Matthew 26, 59 through 61. It appeals to the flesh. We are emotional beings. And rage baiting, whether it is online or whether it is verbal, whether it is written, typed, whatever, it appeals to our emotions. Because oftentimes it will have a sliver of truth. Oftentimes it will be in regards to a subject that we care about. Our families, our nation. A perceived allegiance to some man-made, flawed political party. But what happens is our emotions are so strong that we oftentimes lose control. And we do stupid stuff. Proverbs 26, 17 through 21 says, "He who passes by and meddles in a quarrel not his own, is like one who takes a dog by the ears." Just because you can say something doesn't mean you need to. Just because you have an opinion, not everyone needs to hear it. I guarantee it. You can keep your opinions to yourself. Because when you quarrel, when you step into someone else's business, you're like that stupid man, that foolish man who grabs a dog by the ears. Like a madman who throws firebrands and arrows and death, is the man who deceives his neighbor and says, "Oh, I was only joking." Where there is no wood, the fire goes out. And where there is no talebearer, strife ceases. So much can come into our ears, and we can just shut our mouths. As charcoal is to burning coals and wood to fire, so is a contentious man to kindle strife. Outbursts of rage is a work of the flesh, and it focuses more on what it does, specifically how it consumes and blinds us. Proverbs 14 verse 17 tells us a quick-tempered man acts not with wisdom, but foolishly. The fool believes and has to share every idea that he has. He has to let everyone know how he feels on every subject. I don't have time. And I hope that you don't give a person who has to vent every feeling, every thought on every topic, because they're just looking for something. Because they're missing something in their lives. And so this is their purpose. This is what they've set their heart and mind on. And they see themselves as a warrior for truth. When we are so consumed with feeding the rage bait, feeding it distorts our reality. And it makes issues bigger than they truly are. Psalm 37 verse 8 speaks about that. And this happens time and time again. In Matthew 27 and verse 20, the chief priests and elders persuaded the multitudes. That idea of persuaded is bring them along. Being that talebearer, winning them over with strong and powerful and enticing words, spinning their own narrative to hurt the image of Christ, to hurt the persona of Christ and his apostles. The outrage is not a natural emotional response. It is an emotional response. But what psychologists and what people who study this much more deeply than what I was able to, they are not calling it an emotional response, but it is actually manufactured outrage. Manufactured outrage. Because oftentimes people are getting angry in such a way that the person who is enlisting, the person who is spreading the rage bait, would be satisfied. I don't want you just to get angry. I want you to get angry and go out and burn a building down. I want you to get so angry that you go out and you try to kill someone. I want you to get angry so much that you see all the people who look, feel, act like this as all the same. It is a manufactured response. And we see this. We actually see this. In Acts 21 and verse 30, and all the city was disturbed. Now this word disturbed comes from a Greek word which means as something that has been set up, and they are disturbing it in such a way that the dominoes are going to fall just like they want. Water is going to cascade just the way that they've kind of diverted it. It is a manufactured response by the people spinning their lies, spreading hate, rage bait. You know, Paul cleansed himself as to keep up with the cultural practices in Acts 21. But this outrage that they spun, I find it funny that nothing that Paul ever did was good enough for them. And so they wanted to cause problems, getting Rome involved, verses 31 and following. It causes us to engage in sinful behavior, hatred, malice, combative spirit, which we ought not to have. Colossians 3, 6 through 8. But when we do this, we are guilty of giving place to the devil. Ephesians 4 and verse 27. And we're not supposed to give the devil a foothold. We're not to give him anything that he can latch on to use. We're supposed to be calm, cool, and collective. So how do we avoid it? How do we avoid partaking in rage bait? Being guilty of rage bait? Well, I could just say, don't type it, don't speak it. That would be too easy. You see, sometimes we just, again, we have to vent. But we have to see ourselves and desire to be that wise man who holds our feelings back. Because our feelings can be manufactured by our environment. Our feelings could be a false reality. The heart is deceitful. The most deceitful thing that we have. We need to make sure that we use it appropriately. Satan rejoices when he makes God's people. And you might get mad at this, but that's okay. The devil rejoices when God's people see themselves as American first. I'm an American first. I'm a Tennessean first. I'm a German first. I'm white first. I'm a man first. I'm a blue-collar worker first. And when we make that distinction, we're pitting ourselves up against someone else, whether or not we realize it. If we say, I'm an American first, then that means we're taking on the ideologies and the principles of America, and anyone and everyone who is not American first is our enemy. And they pose a threat to our idea of American first. We must not be ignorant of the devil's tactics. 2 Corinthians 2 and verse 11. C.S. Lewis got it just right. The game is to keep them so busy thinking about anything but God. And he wrote this in a book about contentions and about divisions, how we find things to hold on to pursue, that take the place of God. We can be angry and sin not, nor give place to the devil, Ephesians 4, 26 through 27. But that is where so many mess up. Ask yourself, am I wanting to win an argument or win a soul? At the end of the day, that's really what it comes down to. Do you want to win a soul from a non-believer or a brother or sister in Christ that is in sin, or do you just want to be right? A soft answer turns away wrath, but the harsh words stir up anger. The tongue of the wise uses knowledge rightly, but the mouth of fools poureth forth foolishness. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, keeping watch on the evil and on the good. You're not going to hide it from God. But here we go. A wholesome tongue is as a tree of life, but perversiveness in it breaks the spirit. We need to study and ponder how we are to react. Proverbs 15 and verse 28. Be swift to hear, slow to speak. We as God's people are not to be entangled in the affairs of this world. 2 Timothy 2, 3 through 5. But we need to make sure that it is a worthy fight. And even some definitions of a worthy fight, of a worthy obstacle, of a worthy duty, do not come first. Outranking God, Luke 9 and verse 60. You know, the only thing that people should have against you is not your political party, not your nationality, but your doctrine. That is the only thing that someone should have against you. As much as depends upon you, live at peace with all men. Our minds need to be focused on what God wants. Philippians 4 and verse 8. And let them make fun of you for not engaging, for being different. 1 Peter chapter 4 verses 3 through 4. Because our minds need to be truly on what matters. Proverbs 17, 27 through 28 says, He who has knowledge spare his words, and a man of understanding is of a calm spirit. Even a fool is counted wise when he holds his peace. When he shuts his lips, he is considered prospective. And that is because we as God's people, since we have been raised with Christ, we set our mind on things that are above and not on things below. We overcome evil with good. Romans 12, 17 through 21. You see, you can't let your light shine if you're spreading demeaning information. Information that is not spoken in love. You can't let your light shine so that the unbelievers will glorify God. The devil does not fear our emotions, but rather he uses them. So give no place to the devil, and let your light shine for the purposes of what? That your good works may glorify your God in heaven. Who? Those that we're living amongst. Those that we're letting see our light. Not our political party, not our nationality, not our ethnicity, not anything that we can seem to divide ourselves over. I'm sick of it. When it says, I was filling out some medical information, and I understand the purposes of it asking you about your ethnicity and all that, but I'm so tempted to just say, I prefer not to answer. But we need to stop dividing ourselves and get to work. And instead of making arguments and pushing agendas of this world, do your job as a Christian. Matthew 28, 19 and 20. When we engage and we're using political party agendas, sports, whatever, and not God, we're showing that we have not truly committed ourselves, entrusted ourselves to God. That our hope, that our safety, that our future depends upon something else. Political party, nationality, ethnicity, whatever. It needs to stop. It needs to stop. And we as God's people, we have a job to do. If you're here this morning and something has been said that maybe you're curious on how to become a child of God, We want you to become a child of God the way that the Bible tells you you're going to become a child of God. Not my opinion, not your opinion, not the tradition of men, but by the words of Christ, by the words of God Himself. But maybe you are here this morning and you are a Christian, but you're guilty of being enamored and rage baiting. Maybe you've allowed discussions at work, online, to entrap you, to ensnare you, to provoke you to thinking ill thoughts of your fellow man, and you're blinded to see that they are a soul made in the image of God. If anyone has any need this morning, please come forward as we stand united and as we sing.
Today is the day of salvation.